Hello, friends, and welcome to the show. Today I'm going to be talking about internet censorship, the change of tone coming from California. I'll also be discussing masks, and I'll lightly touch on the Senate filibuster. But before we get started, why don't you go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you'd like to contribute to the show, please go to notcensoredyet.com/donate. You'll find links available where you can help us grow and produce more consistent quality content. So let's get started. Here is a tweet thread from Caitlin Johnstone. There has been a purge of left-wing accounts from social media, with socialist organizers being targeted on Facebook and multiple Antifa-associated accounts suspended from Twitter. The World Socialist website also reports the following. On Friday, Facebook carried out a purge of left-wing anti-war and progressive pages and accounts, including leading members of the Socialist Equality Party. Facebook gave no explanation why the accounts were disabled or even a public acknowledgement that the deletions had occurred. And why is that important? Because, well, I was going to make a joke about who bans the anti-fascists, most likely fascists, but that's probably hitting the nail on the head. But I will say this. If you keep banning everybody the establishment does not like, it's eventually going to go from far right to far left, moderate right to moderate left, center right to center left, and then you'll be left with the establishment. And you are seeing that happen right now. And there's a reason why people were shouting from the rooftops, even on the left, saying, I don't understand why you are celebrating this because it'll eventually come for us. The New York Post reports the following. Twitter has suspended several popular accounts with alleged ties to Antifa, which have more than 71,000 followers combined, following the Inauguration Day riots. And why would they do that? I thought Antifa was not involved. I was told it was a strictly right-wing issue. At least 4 accounts tied with the militant group have been yanked offline, including the Base BK, the account for the Anarchist Center in Bushwick, Brooklyn. I believe that is the bookstore that they use as like a training ground for Antifa members. This follows a mass purge of right-wing accounts in the wake of the Capitol riot earlier this month. A swing back of the censorship pendulum that surprises nobody who knows anything about anything. That purge was broadly supported by shitlibs and a surprisingly large percentage of the true left, despite the overwhelming and growing pile of evidence that it is impossible to consent to internet censorship for other ideologies without consenting to censorship for your own. And that, apart from the, vulgarities in that sentence, that is a very well thought out sentence, right? So if you consent to somebody else's rights being taken away, you are consenting to your rights being taken away as well, because eventually you're going to find yourself into that position. You will find yourself as the opposition to some ideology. And that's actually what I'm going to be talking about when it comes to the Senate filibuster here in a little bit. I encountered many arguments in support of the right-wing purge from the online left while it was happening, and none of them were good. They're only banning fascists, they told me. Why are you defending the fascists? In reality, these social media giants have never claimed to be banning fascists, and there's no reason to believe that their policy white nationalists like Richard Spencer are still there. So it's strange too, right? So you're banning fascists, but they still have the Iranian mullah on there. They have the CCP on there touting how good it is that they're sterilizing Uyghurs because they want to keep their population low to bolster the Chinese population. They want to make sure that they don't have a rise in that minority population. And even if these outlets did have a policy of banning fascists, what is the definition of fascist, or what definition of fascist are they using? Do proponents of Silicon Valley censorship believe they'll be using their personal definition of fascism to determine whose political speech is off limits? Do you think they'll be calling you personally to consult with you on whom to ban? How do you imagine this works exactly? And I agree basically 100% on this. I'd say 90%. But you can't, the problem with fascists is everybody's a fascist right now. Everybody who didn't vote for Biden is being called a fascist. And that's bananas. Imagine calling all those Mexicans down on the border of Texas, which was a Democrat wall basically along the border between Texas and Mexico, that all flipped their vote red. Imagine calling them fascists. And maybe they just said, "Hey, we benefited from all this stuff that Trump has been doing. We were making more money, we were X, Y, and Z, and we felt like Trump was the better candidate." Does that make them a fascist, or does that make them someone who basically voted with their pocketbook? I wouldn't call them a fascist because that would just be blatantly ignorant. They always censor the left, they told me. We're just happy that now they're censoring fascists too. So you imagine it can't get worse. We just saw a major escalation against leftist accounts these past few days. Do you think that's the end of it? What do you imagine will happen if the left ever gets close to actually threatening the interests of the powerful after you helped manufacture consent for the normalization of internet censorship every step of the way? That's true. If you cheer it on, eventually that leopard's going to eat your face. It can always get worse. The online left has not yet experienced mass scale censorship of political speech yet. It's experienced losing a few accounts here and there. You haven't seen anything yet. Some Twitter leftists really seem to think that getting suspended because Kamala Harris supports mass reported them, or Kamala Harris supporters mass reported them over a mean tweet, is as ugly as this thing will get. If your goal is to threaten power at some point, and if you're a real leftist, it should be, then you need to oppose the normalization of any policies that can be used to silence those who threaten the powerful. And that's what I've been saying the whole time, friends, because these useful idiots who have been cheering on the censorship are eventually going to be the threat to the establishment because they're the loud voices rattling the cages, basically allowing the new establishment to take power, to gain hold in the government. Well, it's not like leftist revolution will be planned on social media anyway, they told me. You don't use social media to plan the leftist revolution, you use it to create more leftists. And that's true. Well, I mean, you create it to create a safe space where people can talk, and then you can invite people to the group and they'll adopt your ideology. You use it to bring consciousness and understanding to your ideas and your causes. Consenting to the institutionalization of the censorship of political speech is consenting to your own silence on this front, which will mean the only people who will be able to quickly share ideas and information online with the mainstream population will be those who support the very power structures you oppose. And make no mistake, the imperial narrative managers most certainly do not need the public's consent for internet censorship. They don't pour vast fortunes into manufacturing consent for evil agendas because it's fun. They do it because they require the public's consent. The empire's inverted totalitarianism only holds together because they're able to maintain the illusion of freedom and democracy. The iron-fisted silencing of wholesome political speech can only happen if the public has been paced into believing it's a good thing. Every step of the tightening of the censorship noose is a part of this pacing, and if you consent to it, you're helping them. This is it, right there. This is the goal. Trying to narrative manage people into conformity didn't work, so now they're working to reinstate the supremacy of mainstream gatekeepers. Matt Taibbi she quoted Matt Taibbi, ultimately, this consent moderation movement will restore a system where the only allowable route to a mass audience is through a major institutional partner, basically the establishment. When you realize that corporations are America's real government, the whole "it isn't censorship if it's a private company doing it" argument is seen for the joke it is. To support the censorship of online speech is to support the authority of monopolistic tech oligarchs to exert more and more global control over human communication. Regardless of your attitude towards whoever happens to be getting deplatformed on any given day, supporting this can only be self-destructive. So basically, by supporting internet censorship, you're allowing the tech companies, you are allowing the government. And this is my biggest problem, actually, because a lot of people don't remember this. And this only happened just a couple months ago. You had Democrats in basically their talking points in election were we're going to regulate big tech to death because they're allowing conservatives to have a voice. And we don't believe conservatives should have a voice. So what happens after the election? They start calling for conservative voices to be deplatformed, and big tech says, well, I know we probably shouldn't deplatform them, but if we deplatform them, maybe the Democrats will forget their promise of regulating us to death. And so they go through with that deplatforming, and then the politicians cheer it on. So my problem with the whole private business thing that people like to tweet and they like to Facebook is they don't know what they're talking about. So yes, Twitter is a private business. Facebook is a private business. But when you have a government official threatening that corporation to regulate them into the toilet or to break them up because they're sort of a monopoly, they have a cornerstone in the market, they're basically saying, you do what we tell us to do, or you do what we tell you to do, or we will end you. And so it's not like a recommendation, they're threatening that company to do something with the power of the government behind them. So it's no longer a private company doing something on their own. They're basically just doing the dirty work for the government without the government having to do the dirty work. So let's go on to the next story. Conservatives are suspicious after California Governor Newsom eases lockdown following Biden inauguration. California Governor Gavin Newsom has lifted his state's partial stay-at-home order, permitting some dining and services to resume. With cases only beginning to drop, conservative commentators accused him of playing politics. Newsom announced the decision on Monday after an official in his administration sent a letter to restaurant owners revealing the plan. All counties in the state will return to a tier-based system of restrictions, with outdoor dining and indoor salons allowed to reopen in purple tier areas. Newsom's decision was met with cynicism by conservatives, who accused the Democrat governor of waiting until Joe Biden's inauguration to lift the ban, now that the economic shutdown could no longer be used to hurt former President Biden. And then it's just a bunch of tweets from people basically saying, 5 days after Biden's inauguration, California is reportedly ending its stay-at-home order and opening back up bars and restaurants. Timing is probably just a coincidence. That was from Clay Travis. Democratic leaders in multiple states have rolled back their coronavirus restrictions in the week since Biden took office. Michigan, Illinois, and Washington, D.C. all eased their virus prevention measures in recent days. However, Newsom likely had other political reasons to lift the order. His lockdown was miserably unpopular, and at least 723,000 Californians have signed a petition to recall him from the governor's mansion in response. Should the petition gather 1.5 million names by March 17th, Newsom's continued tenure as governor would go to a ballot. California is currently reporting around 20,000 cases of COVID-19 per day, down from a record of 62,000 in December. Whoa, so I didn't realize it was that bad. 62,000 cases a day in California, and they had some of the most just ridiculous lockdowns. When the stay-at-home order was first issued, deaths are still higher now than they were in early December. Well, that makes sense because it lags about 2 weeks behind. And with only a glimpse of recovery on the horizon, some COVID-concerned commenters accuse Newsom of lifting restrictions to save his own skin at the expense of public health. And something else that people are mentioning is the data that Newsom used to initiate this lockdown, or even to lift this lockdown. At the beginning of the whole pandemic, Newsom stated that all the information was going to be made public. That way he could be as transparent as possible. But I think starting around November, December, he stopped giving that information to the public, became a closed book, and said, well, I don't want to create confusion. And then you have scientists basically say, why do you believe you would create confusion? We can just look at the numbers and then go, well, probably in a couple of weeks we'll be opening up. It's okay, guys. It's just stay relaxed. Things are bad. Things are going to get better. Things are looking up. But he just became a closed book, and just it ticked a lot of people off. And that's why he's halfway towards being recalled as a governor. Let's jump to the next story. Here's a tweet from Drew Holden. I'm starting to think we didn't handle this whole mask wearing things perfectly. Here's a a news article from CNN. Masks can't stop the coronavirus in the U.S., but hysteria has led to bulk buying, price gouging, and serious fear for the future. And then fast forward to yesterday, January 25th, wearing 2 masks instead of 1 is probably more effective to stop the spread of the coronavirus. That's bananas. So, an article from dailywire.com, Dr. Fauci again changes mask wearing recommendations. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who early in the pandemic said Americans need not wear masks, has once again changed his recommendation. Fauci, an immunologist and director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, who served on President Trump's White House coronavirus task force, is now President Biden's chief medical advisor on COVID-19. Now says wearing 2 masks is likely more effective than wearing 1. If you have a physical covering with 1 layer and you put another layer on top of it, just makes common sense that it'll likely be more effective. That does not sound very scientific at all. It's like, oh man, if I put 1 blanket on and I put another blanket on, I would be more likely to be warm if it was cold outside. Back in March, Fauci said there's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and there might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think it is, the doctor said on CBS News. But the response to the virus has been evolving since then, which makes sense. So Fauci even admitted that he kind of lied. He didn't want the PPE to be taken from the hospitals. Soon after Fauci made his comments, experts, including the CDC, said Americans should wear masks, citing estimates that 40% or more of those infected were asymptomatic but could still spread the virus. And that's even where Fauci has flip-flopped on. He said that you are asymptomatic spread isn't a thing. Then he says it's a thing. Then he says it's not. So it's really hard to say. The Times cites Lindsay Marr, an expert in virus transmission at Virginia Tech, who said if you combine multiple layers, you start achieving a pretty high efficiencies of blocking virus from exiting and even entering the nose or mouth. Of course, there's a drawback. We run the risk of making it too hard to breathe. The CDC says COVID-19 spreads mainly from person to person through respiratory droplets. Respiratory droplets travel into the air when you cough, sneeze, shout, or sing. These droplets can then land in the mouths or noses of people who are near you, or they may breathe these droplets in. And the federal agency now says that a cloth mask also offers some protection to you too. How well it protects you from the breathing in the virus likely depends on the fabrics used and how your mask is made. The CDC is currently studying these factors and says more evaluation is needed. But if you don't wash your mask, then it's probably not going to work as well as even just your cheap disposable medical masks that you can buy from Walmart. All right, and let's touch on the filibuster real quick. The Senate's record-breaking gridlock under Trump. President Donald Trump is facing more delays to his nominees than any previous president, and if Joe Biden beats him, the former vice president might get it even worse. The Senate's confirmation process is nearly broken, and the numbers show it's race to the bottom. George W. Bush faced the most procedural hurdles and filibusters to his nominees until Barack Obama was elected and faced historic blockades. Then Trump came along and became the record holder in just part of a term. According to Politico, analysis of Senate votes. It's the latest glaring sign of Senate's dysfunction, showing just how difficult it has become to staff up an administration, and it's hard to imagine that Republicans will go easy on Biden if he wins, even as both parties decry the trend. It's a major concern, having gone through a couple of these confirmations myself, said Senator Ron Portman, who faced little opposition when confirmed to be Bush's budget director and top trade diplomat. We've got to figure this out. If you do it on one side, it tends to happen on the other side. And here are the under Trump procedural delays in Senate are skyrocketing. The president faces an increasing number of filibusters on nominees accelerating a recent trend. So I tried searching for the total number of filibusters that had occurred during the Trump presidency, and I couldn't find it. I could just find this article just about his political appointees. So you can see Bush had 39. So Clinton had 15 that they needed a cloture vote, so they needed 60 votes. Bush had 39, Obama had a whopping 175. But then in 4 years, Trump managed to achieve 314 votes. So what people fail to realize is the issue with the packing of the courts, not even the packing of the courts, but just the Republicans being able to shove judges into the courts in the past 4 years, it's the Democrats' fault. The Democrats changed the rules, not for the Supreme Court, but for just normal judicial nominees and normal cabinet picks, right? So they dropped it down to the nuclear option. You just needed 51 votes. And so they did that. Mitch McConnell, when he became the Senate Majority Leader, he was trying to get Supreme Court nominees in. He said, you know what? You guys changed the rules before. We'll just match the Supreme Court with the normal court, because why should it be any different? And so there's a lot of complaining about things when it comes to that. And so if the Democrats get rid of the filibuster and just cram legislation down people's throats, there's going to be a backlash amongst conservatives, and you're going to see a red wave, whether you like it or not. And that red wave is going to bring in a whole bunch of new senators, a whole bunch of new people in the House. And they may not re-implement the filibuster, because you know what? Why should they? You took that right away from them. And I believe even Kevin McCarthy was complaining about the new House rules, where the minority party was stripped of its voice. It was stripped of a lot of its influence that it could basically tout on the floor of the House. And he said a lot of these rights that you took away were the rights we gave to you after you had taken them away before. Then the Republicans became the party in power in the House, and then they graciously said, you know what, Democrats, we'll be the bigger people. We'll give you those rights and protections. And then as soon as that, the party margin is only 6 votes, now the Democrats don't want any chance for the Republicans to be able to fight them on bills. So they take that right away. And it's disturbing, because all it's going to do is just create more animosity. It's going to take away from that unity. It's going to make people more divisive, because you're going to have individuals who say, why should I allow you to have a filibuster if you're going to take it away from me? I'm not going to give it back to you once I'm in power. And guess what? You're not going to like those 2 years when that happens. So I think it's just going to be a self-destructive game of who can race to the bottom first. So that's it for now. I'm going to post this up. I'm going to do more research here in a little bit, and I'll post up another video in a couple hours. See y'all later. Bye.